Hi everyone, welcome to Everything Dog Training Podcast with me, John McGuigan, Glasgow dog trainer and behaviour consultant. Welcome if it's your first time and welcome back if you're joining us again. You can reach out to me in a number of ways. You can get me through my socials at Glasgow Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. And you can also get me on my email, info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. I'm always looking for topics to discuss and guests as well. So if you've got something interesting to say about your world with your dog, whether you're a professional or a keen amateur, then give me a shout. I'm always interested in getting guests on. So thank you for that. Before I move on to what we're talking about today, I just wanted to say this is a last chance to join our membership community in its current iteration. I'm revamping a few things, so this is your last chance to get in with where we are just now. I'll be changing the price point on it as well. That's not been firmed up yet, but you can get in on that. If you use the code podcast50, you'll get 50% off your first month. So its monthly membership is £15, which works out about $20 or thereabouts. And you can cancel at any time. There's no minimum tie-in period. If you like this podcast, you'll absolutely love the membership. I am confident to say it will be some of the best money you'll ever invest in your dog's care. Okay, we can go into a pet supermarket and easily come out once a month with 40, 50, 60, 80 or £100 worth of stuff for, that's toys and food. And I know food's necessary, but we spend money on our dog's toys. And as far as I see, we don't spend the same amount of investment in time or monetary value in our dog's education. So please do consider joining. The last time for this, where it is just now, and the link is in the show notes for that, and use the code podcast50 for 50% off your first month. So what we're talking about today, we have monthly calls on our membership. There's hundreds of videos on there, so there's well over 400 videos, video lessons on there. And one of the things that we do each month is we have a live call, which is usually the first Wednesday of every month, and we talk about a topic. And the topic for this week's discussion the question is, it was posed by Caroline, who's one of our members. Does or has anyone ever felt disconnected with their dog or a dog that they're working with? And she further elaborates that by saying, as in, do you not feel a whole lot of love, especially when training? Usually when I see fairly quickly what a dog needs and how to meet those needs, and dogs often look very grateful. So that's what Caroline has put forward for our discussion for tonight, which you'll be listening to in this episode. And the questions I've further asked, which we'll elaborate on throughout the episode that you're about to listen to, I've said, what does disconnected look like? Okay, so what does, if you were to say, my dog is disconnected with me, what are you seeing? What are the observable behaviours that lead you to that conclusion? So describe the behaviours, which are verbs rather than adjectives, okay, and look at what disconnected looks like. We can also look at what does grateful look like. Okay, so what is the dog doing that leads you to the conclusion that they are grateful, in quotation marks? What are our reinforcers for those interactions, and might they be lacking? If they're lacking, what can we do about it? And what are the dog's reinforcers and needs, and how can we meet them? Okay, so that's what we discussed. It was a really nice discussion. The discussions are usually fairly organic. They go in various places as people throw things up during the discussion. Very often I pause, which you've probably heard me doing with my guests, and I just ask for further elaboration on this, and it's to get a deeper understanding of things. So hopefully you will love this episode, and please do let us know. I always like getting feedback, and thank you to the people who have given me feedback in the last couple of days. It's really appreciated. Okay, so the question for today is, thanks for joining us, the question for today from Caroline. The question is, does or has anyone ever felt disconnected with their dog or a dog? As in, you don't feel a whole lot of love, especially when training.
Usually when I train, I can fairly quickly. So I can see, usually when I train, I can see fairly quickly what a dog needs and how to meet those needs. And the dogs often look grateful. And I will talk about my questions in a second on that. Okay, so Caroline, do you want to go first because it was your question and just expand on that a little bit for me?
Yes. It's a question I've have been, mulling over for some time as a trainer too, because you can, like you go in and you can assess a dog quite well, intuitively. However, I was sent a little challenge myself. I have a lovely little boy, a spaniel, who's been kind of staying with me forever. His owner, unfortunately, has been unwell, and he's not an easy dog. In the sense, he's a rescue. He's had terrible beginning. He's gone from two homes, etc. But the training's been going well, but he's very forgetful. He forgets and not forgets, but you have to continually repeat and repeat and repeat. And after several months and more months and more months, you're still repeating. But then you notice. I think I called you once, and then I realized that the issue was probably more about me than the dog, and he was probably sensing some of the frustration and didn't know how to handle that himself.
Okay.
And I noticed, and I it's come up in quite a few of your things, is my tension was there. And I realized that I hadn't really connected with the dog because, in some ways, I resent it because he takes my time away from my own dog because I'm
Okay.
having to focus all my energies on him.
Yeah.
So I then thought, you know, how important it was that we connect with the dog that we're working with. Because if we don't, we're not really able to communicate with the dog understand what the dog's needs are because we've kind of sort of blanked ourselves off through frustration, or it could go back to past, you may have had a dog similar to that that's sort of triggered that sort of memory, and you're not really working well with this dog. So I thought it'd be quite a good one to throw to everyone is, has anybody ever felt that when they're working with their own dog or with another person's dog, that they don't quite connect with that dog and they're trying to work out, how do you connect? How do you find that connection? What changes do you need to make to help that dog? Or is it that you just you can't connect with every dog, like you can't connect with every human? Is it that they're just some dogs that you can't connect with?
So there's a
That's
couple of
the
things
question.
there. I'm going to ask. So when you're saying you're working with a Springer or a Cocker Spaniel?
It's a cocker, non-working. It's a
Okay,
sort of a show, yeah. He's got back issues and stuff. And
that's cool. Okay, so from the work that you normally do, would you expect? So I take it you're not doing very much different, or in fact, you will be doing more than you normally do with other dogs that you work with. Yeah.
yes and no, because that's the other thing, because it's not a client's dog, therefore it's having the time to focus on him because he's very high needs. He has a lot of needs.
Okay.
Um, but when I got off the phone to you that last time, and then I think I saw one of your videos, and no, then we had the last Zoom call or something. That's when I realized that it was me. So I changed the way I approached things. And then I looked back and realized I was focusing so much on the negative that I was setting the day out. So when we went out for our morning walk, which is sort of training and
Sure.
fun and stuff, I'd already gone out with a negative. I was
Okay.
already expecting it. So
Okay. So there's a couple of things there. Just as you're making these points, I just want to, before we open it up to everybody, uh, if you've got a dog that the things that you would normally do aren't working. So we've got a normal bell curve of statistics. Okay, so you've got, say we take any population of, so we take Labradors, right? You'll have, so the characteristics that we think of in a Labrador are generally social. Okay, so they're generally human friendly, generally pretty dog friendly. They like food. Okay, and the there was an article published fairly recently, and it was talking about there's a genetic marker for hunger that in Labradors, which is either not prevalent in other breeds or more prevalent in Labradors. Okay, which is why they're constantly hungry. So that makes them relatively easy to train with food. Okay. Now, within that population, so we've got three characteristics there: sociability with people, sociability with dogs, and willingness to eat food. And if we take 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 Labradors and mark those, you'll get some dogs who are extremely sociable. So they're the outlier at the high end. So they're much more sociable than the normal, than the average, if you like. Okay, I mean, I don't want to get a big lesson in statistics. I'm still traumatized from university when I had to do stats, right? But we've got those outliers that are extremely friendly, right? And then you've got at the other end of the bell curve, you've got the dogs that are not friendly at all, so they're not sociable. Okay, and that could be, we could even start going further down and looking at instances of fear and so on and so on. Okay, now within that, if you plot that out in a bell curve, okay, the bell curve will look like a fairly standard bell curve. It does for most populations. And when you're getting the dogs that you're talking about, Caroline, they tend to be outliers. Okay, so they're the dogs that the things that you normally do don't work with. Okay, and given that's our starting point, we then have to go, how do we adapt to dealing with an outlier? All right. So there was yeah, right. So that's there, and I'll ask my questions in a second. So does anybody in fact I'll ask you, Caroline, what are you um what would your when you're saying you're not connecting with the dog, okay, what are you seeing in the dog's behavior that is making you reach that conclusion?
Well, having launched that question, things changed a bit. So we are making a connection, but he was very sort of closed behind his eyes, almost like he's still attached to his owner. There's
Right, 2 seconds, hang on. Right, so I'm just going to pause you there, and it's important.
mm,
So we can't see attachment to owner when the owner's not there.
mm.
So what are you seeing? What observable behaviors are you seeing that is making you reach that conclusion?
Um, well, that's a hard one. That's a hard question to answer, isn't it? I mean, it's mostly when we're out. So in the house and everything, he's good. He's doing as he's told. The minute we go out, he's good for most of it, and then he just loses the plot on certain things which we've gone over and we've gone over, and I've changed. I've done the ward and the food. I've done the stillness or the focus, but it's like he disconnects, or I feel that I think the disconnection is more my frustration, but
Okay.
I don't feel there's that that desire to, he just got one goal straight ahead there, and it's straight lines, not
Okay.
like a typical spaniel who'll go left and
That's
right.
good.
This dog goes straight lines.
What would he have to do to make you reach the or lead you to the conclusion that he was connected with you? What behaviors would you have to see?
Him coming back on command, which he's beginning to do now, which
Okay.
is why this question's gone a bit. He's beginning to come back more because I've upped the rewards. Instead of just giving one or two, I've followed your thing of giving him much more rewards. So it's
Okay.
making it him coming back. But as soon as he's had his rewards, he goes deaf again, and then you see the
Cool.
dog, and he goes deaf again. But
Okay.
it's a hard one. It was a hard one to describe because at the time I didn't feel I personally connected with him
That's
that I
okay.
could form a
That's okay.
bond. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's break that down further. Okay. Uh, we'll talk in for those of those are so I don't know the people who have just joined us who's new to this and what your background is. Um, and again, Caroline, the the last thing I want for you to, because I know that you're on a journey moving towards positive training, right? And I
Yeah.
certainly want to assist you on that, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to appear to be overly critical all the time, but we'll just
Okay.
take some of the words, right?
That's
Cues,
okay.
not commands. Okay, if we build that into vocabulary, that it is a cue, and a cue is think of your theatrical cue or a musical cue. That's a cue for you to start. Okay, and if we think of a command as an imperative, you will. Okay, so we give soldiers give commands. Okay, um, you'll even see in that ancient language if you ever get an audience with the king, and it'll be a command performance, right? In a Western democracy, anyway, right? So, but that's from old. That's old, where there is a subject and a master, if you like. Okay, so we've got that command based, and if we change it to cue, it does change how we start viewing our relationship with our dog. Okay. So if we look at that there, rather than saying he does the behavior when commanded, we can then say he responds to the cue versus he doesn't respond to the cue. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, when we've upped our, you then said about using rewards, it reinforcers, okay, and we know that it's reinforcing the behavior if we see an increase of the behavior. And if we're not seeing an increase of the behavior, then we're not reinforcing anything with food. So I get it a lot on my socials. People turn around and say too many treats, and I say I don't use treats. Okay, you'll hear me saying to the client, treat, treat, but that's a cue for them to deliver the food. We see our treats as, so if you look at a food treat for humans, most of it will have fat and most of it will have sugar, and yeah, most of it will. And if you suggest a food treat to me, right, a treat, something decadent that doesn't have sugar or doesn't have fat in it, I am not interested in it, okay, because it's not a treat, it's now just food stuff, okay. So that's now if we think of that we're delivering treats to the dog rather than using food to reinforce behavior, we now start going, well, there's too many treats, the dog's getting too many treats, and then that goes back to our view of food, how we deal with a child. You can't get it, you're being too greedy by eating too many sweets, and so on and so on. Okay, and the reasons why we do that with children, and it's for health reasons, spoiling their appetite and so on. All right, and getting overweight and having too much sugar and all the rest of it. Okay, so we've got food reinforcers now. When you said there, when you started using more reinforcers, so more foods rather, you started seeing some increase in behavior, but the dog would then disconnect from you and go back to doing what they were doing. Okay, so now we've got the behavior of interacting with you, and competing with that is the behavior of interacting other ways with the environment, which is the pulling ahead. Yeah, you with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, all good. Okay. Now, we then look at those behaviors of pulling and moving ahead and having that, catatonic looking on his face, that kind of dead eye. Those things there are suggestive that the dog's really not having a good time at all. Okay. All right. And then that further leads me to some sort of conclusion or towards the view that there's something fairly severely or profoundly wrong with the dog in some way. And whether that's neurologically, physically, physiologically, okay, biochemically, and a whole bunch of other things, right? Right. Now, it means then we go like that. Can we design a life for that dog? Which means that we've got more calmness, more stillness, more focus on you. So you said earlier that your dog was doing really well in the house or starting to do better in the house.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah,
what might be getting in the way of that as soon as you step over the door?
It's probably a combination of three things. One, it is the environment. So if he's triggered by other male dogs,
Yeah.
largely, um, and being a spaniel, of course, the smells and the sound and trains. If he sees trains, I've managed to work him off cars, but trains trigger him. So I think half his problem is he's waiting for a train to
Okay.
zoom past. But also, I wonder, you hit it on the head about the neurological and the pain, because as a puppy, he was kept in a crate for a lot of his time. He wasn't out much, and his back legs and his back, etc. So, like when you put a harness on him, it's weird. His whole back will collapse.
Okay.
He collapses. So
Okay.
I think the harness or the lead or whatever, he doesn't like it being put on, but once it's on, he's fine. So I think there's pain or something
Yeah.
involved in there.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Right. So that's good that we've identified that, and then you would look at a vet solution for those issues as well as the training issues. Okay. Right. Now, when you said there, we'll deal with him looking at dogs first. When he sees male dogs, you said he's triggered. So what does he do when he sees a male dog?
Oh, where the tail goes in the, like, they call it the fly tail. The tail goes up, and
Okay,
the thing, and he starts to
okay,
what I
so
call
he's
posturing,
okay.
and then he loses it. It's like
2 seconds. 2 seconds. I'm going to break that down more because your definition of losing it might be different from mine. Okay.
yeah, okay, he'll just want to just go for the dog, which it could either be fear-based, but he
Two
actually
seconds. Hang on. We'll strip it back again. Okay. What does going for the
uh,
dog look? What does going for the dog look like?
when a dog kind of like trots, they start to posture and do that, and then he'll just start growling,
Okay.
and then he's just like full on launching
Cool.
to go
Okay.
for it. So I'll distract and
Right.
turn.
So we've got the number of behaviors there as we approach a male dog.
Acting for little dog.
Yep. Head lifts. Yeah.
hmm
Okay. Tail starts moving in a specific way, which it
Yeah,
doesn't.
already out. Yeah.
Okay. Which it doesn't in other instances. Okay.
No, only like, typical spaniel tail, but
Yep.
this one is stiff and it's up.
He moves ahead and will he pull on the lead at that point?
Oh, he'll be
Yeah, cool.
raring
Okay,
to
so
go.
we've got head up, difference in tail,
hmm
pulling ahead.
hmm
Okay, with
Chest
tightness
out.
on the lead.
hmm
Okay, what's the vocalization like?
Oh, he'll be growling, barking. But I
Growling
can.
and barking, or growling or barking?
He'll start off with the growl and straight away into, like, full on
Okay.
barking.
Okay, so we've got an episode of growling
hmm
followed by an episode of barking.
hmm
Okay, if he gets closer to the dog, what happens then?
I don't. I mean, he got close to one dog because that other dog was the owner
That's
let the
okay.
lead
So
go.
so is that
They went for each other. It
okay?
was full on, head on, head on.
Right. Okay. Any bites? So we don't know.
He didn't. I think they unusually went. They were face on, but I was already there, but so I was able to
Okay.
pull them
So
apart. But
we've got no bites, okay. And the reason why it's good that we're breaking this down, 'cause a lot of time,
yeah, just
and when people, it's being specific with
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
saying went for another dog. It was full on because dog fights, in inverted commas, are very rarely fights. They're skirmishes.
yeah.
Okay, there are a lot of noise, a lot of movement, flashing of teeth, slobber flying. Okay, and when I say usually if you especially if you know the other dog, when you say were there bites, we know what a bite looks like. Okay, we know that it leaves marks.
Yeah,
Okay, or that there's fur pulled off. Okay, which is a relatively inhibited bite. Okay, and lots of people say they never get to that stage because I've intervened. If they're getting nose to nose, we are not intervening on anything before they can react before they can act before we can react, and they can act a lot, 4, 5, 10 bites before that we've got time to react. Okay, so those are all good signs so far, right? That he's not biting other dogs. Okay, you've now got a list of things there that we can start looking for. At what distance does he see the dog? Before, or sorry, yes or no, and you don't need to answer this, it's just as go through a checklist. Can he see a male dog without his head going up? Can he see a male dog without his tail moving that way? Can he see a male dog without moving forward? And at what distance?
he will tense up if dog's about 800, 100 yards away.
Cool. Okay, so we're getting, he sees a dog 100 yards, okay,
He's already,
up. That's where we stop,
yeah, that's when
okay,
I.
and then we can see, can you do something else there? All right.
Yes, that's when he does that, I call him
Yeah,
and I
perfect.
turn and we
Okay.
go and we'll just do something else somewhere else.
So we've now got
I'll take it back.
measurement that we can start looking at to see, okay, now we're starting to get more into kind of behavioral analysis or behavioral assessment going on here rather, than that kind of disconnect. But it means that we can then remove that word of being disconnected from us because he is not disconnected with us. He is doing other things in the environment which just don't include us. Because if you see when we use language is really, it's so important, and it's so important because the words that you use inform your thought processes, and your thought processes inform your words, so your feelings and your actions. Not quite as clean as that, but you get the idea, okay? Rather than looking at him being disconnected with you, if we can reframe that to say that he is struggling to pay attention to you in the environment. So what do we do about that in order to help him not struggle?
Mm.
It doesn't even have to be paying attention to you. Can we just help him not struggle with the environment?
Yes, he's struggling, isn't he? Because he struggles if you take him anywhere new, he struggles.
Cool,
It takes
right.
him 20, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to calm down if you take him somewhere new.
Okay. Now, I would then look at that further
Mm.
and say, do we need to keep taking him to new places?
What
Okay.
I do is I'll gently introduce him to somewhere, and then I'll gently take him back lots of times, and then when he's come, well, I don't, after a few
That's
visits,
okay.
I'll take him a little bit further and then expand it so that
Okay.
he then has places. So I do try to, but not too quickly. I do
Okay.
it
Now,
gradually at his ability.
okay. To what end though? All right. Okay. So what's his name?
Rocky.
Okay. What is in it for Lockie for you to take him to new places? That's fine. Okay. It's just something for you to think about. And this is to get us thinking. All right. So remember with Logan, remember Helen saying, Logan is a dog who has a small life, who think this is for those of you that don't know, Logan was my big bulldog that I lost in October last year, and he was a proper special needs dog. Okay.
Rocky.
Had bitten people, bitten other dogs, he was I loved that dog, but he was a and because this is public, right? I say with humor, he was a liability, right? Okay, but he was hard to handle outside. Okay, so I kept his life relatively small, but filled that with lots of stuff. So he had safety and security first. Okay, he had good food. I listened to him. We did training. I took him to peaceful places. We played, and he got lots of loving. Okay. Now that's what most dogs get. Just most dogs get that in multiple places and in a big world. All right. He got all of that within our family. And I'm fortunate enough there's two secured paddocks within walking distance. I mean, one's seconds away and one's a couple of minutes away. They were like his happy places. I could take him down there and I could fulfill all his needs in that small area. Now, of course, I wanted to take him to places because I enjoy being out with my dog. But there was, and this took me probably several years to realize this. The question eventually started pondering is what is in it for him for me to keep trying to expand his world when I'm already meeting his needs? All right. Now, and I live in a city anyway, so it's it's an urban. We're not out in we're not. It's not the suburbs that we're in. It is the city, but it's not the city centre, if you like. Okay, but we still it's an urban environment I live in, and you then ask yourself, do I need to keep putting him through an energetically expensive training protocol over and over and over and over and over again when it's actually not going to improve his life an awful lot? Okay. So with young dogs, we certainly want to try that. So you do want to take your young dog out and build up as big a world and make them as robust as possible. I could possibly have kept working through that with Logan, but I don't think I'd ever got to the state. Well, would I ever have gotten to the stage with him where he was happy, like going and sitting in a pub or in a dog-friendly cafe, because not all of us are capable of doing that. So when when you're discussing Loki, there are things that I absolutely just will not do socially. I just turn around and go, nah, not doing it. It's too much for me. I don't enjoy it. Not only do I not enjoy it, it's too expensive for me. I have to take a long time to recover from it. And when I say a long time, 3, 4, 5 days afterwards before I can get back on an even keel because it's drained my social battery so much. Okay. And some dogs are like that. So it's just things to consider. And we then go, well, we can try it. But if you're trying the same things over and over and over and over and over again and you're not seeing a different result, we need to change tact somewhat.
Oh yeah.
Okay, right. I'll pause there before I open up our the
Mm.
other questions I'd asked in the group. Does anybody else want to come in on that? Stick your hand up, Sammy.
Just how much I relate with that, having a fear reactive border collie, and it did took me till a couple of years ago, and I just not stopped trying, but just realised actually I'm just adding stress to him.
Yeah,
And as soon as I stopped being stressed about certain things or anticipating what was around the corner, knowing that, oh, but he should enjoy it. Who wouldn't want to? It's been a game changer. It has actually. So yeah, no, I completely and utterly agree with that
yeah.
sort of like, and he's happy. He doesn't know any different,
No, of
and he's
course he's
not
a dog.
stressed.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he's not stressed. And if he's not stressed, I'm not stressed. And if I'm not stressed, he's not stressed. And like you said about the recovering, it took me a long, like when I got diagnosed with fibro. I mean, previous to that, my God, I was a machine. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, but even now, it takes me a long time to recover. It's always taken him a couple of days to recover, and
yeah.
you can't keep that up 24/7.
No,
And that's no good for any living being. So
yeah.
yeah, no, I love that point. I thought that was brilliant.
No, thank you. So, thanks, Sammy. 2 seconds, Jess. I'm just going to expand a couple of things on what Sammy said there. So, what you said, Sammy, there is we should be able to do this, right? It's a big, and you've seen my stuff if you on that freaking word, right? When we're in a relationship to our dogs, and I'm like that. According to whose metric should we be able to do anything, right? Now, yes, it's that one that I'd put up a few months ago. I'm still getting comments on it about the trainer that didn't move off the path for the dog, and the comments are that trainer should be able to stand there and not be accosted by other dogs. Yeah, okay. And what? She was accosted by another dog, so what's should is now not relevant. Okay, should's a pipe dream, it's wishful thinking because it's not the reality of what we're dealing with. And then what you also said there, Simon, was who wouldn't love this? Your dog, clearly. Right? And he's telling you, I don't like this. All right. In the same way as we've got our preferences for who we want to interact with, music, the food. All right, he's got his preferences as well. Okay, Sammy, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera off because it's giving me vertigo. Okay, just while you're moving around. Okay, right, Jess, use your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to like thank you for that conversation, like of adding that. My dog is a border collie cattle dog that is reactive to chasing cars.
Okay,
So any walk we go on, and we're driving somewhere where I can control the distance to the car.
yeah,
And I've gone through a lot of guilt in the past of like, I feel guilty we don't do that every day because I don't mentally and physically have the energy for that. And
yeah,
now at 8 years old, he's 8 years old now, and I'm kind of in a place like you were talking about of like, he's getting some great enrichment at home. He's
yeah,
getting everything he needs. We don't need to do that more than once a week or twice a week whenever I'm able to.
yeah.
So I
Perfect.
really appreciate that.
No, not at all, not at all. And absolutely. And now, and I would just, and this is not the comment you made there, Jess. It's for I know this because this is going to be public when we're on the podcast. Um, there's the balance. This is why we have to have sound ethics, good knowledge of what our dogs needs, good knowledge of how we can provide that, because it then can start being the trainer says I've not to take the dog out, and I'm like that. Not what I said, right? You know. So we've got that, and I went through it with Logan. 8 years I had him, and for 8 years, 8 years I was like, am I doing enough with this dog? You know, can I do more? You know, and then I remember Helen just turning around and saying, he's a happy dog, you know, given that he's not normal, right? You know, he has a happy life. And I think sometimes what we're doing there, what we're feeling is we can grieve something that we've never had because we had an idea that we were going to have it. So the loss of something that we didn't have is still a loss. okay? And it's still grief that we feel, and grief is that is the feeling that you're feeling, you know. So that's it's just to hopefully that will help. Anybody else before I open? I'm going to ask there are a couple of questions. Helen, you've got your microphone undone. Did you mean that? No. Okay.
Maybe, sorry, I've been struggling.
That's all right. As
I'm
usual.
sorry, I'm just going to say that I put a couple of notes just in the chat. And the first one, anyway, just diverting people into having a quicker, a deeper look at reinforcers. Remember that in the 15-day canine challenge, one of the days there is in relation to reinforcers, what it means, you know, how we motivate, all of that. But I think just making the point there, just in case you haven't seen in the chat, it is helpful to have in mind really as a thread or a spine running through everything we do. It's the same for us, the motivational hierarchy or the reinforcement hierarchy. It is in constant flux all of the time. And it's important to know that so that we're not bringing kind of frustration or disappointment or, you know, sadness or whatever our human emotions are into that. It just means that the value of a reinforcer at any given time, it depends on it being available and the state of mind of the dog, you know, which is always being influenced by, you know, perhaps too much of a good thing, too much of a worrying thing. But in each case, that has an impact on decision making while also reducing the value of a reinforcer, including a previously reliable reinforcer. So if we wonder when we're working with a dog, Caroline, when you're talking about this worked one day or this appeared easier for the dog on another day, and there seems to be little in the way of nuance. Everything's operating all of the time to influence what still constitutes a reinforcer at that moment under those conditions in that environment, contingent upon the reinforcement history and everything else that's going on within the physiology of the dog and also the human because we're part of the environment. So it's once you, I know that seems complex, but actually once you start to simplify that, you just start to look at how do I influence behaviour in such a way that ethically I keep my dog's emotional well-being and behaviour intact. And it's just going back to that point that we make all the time, that sometimes involves some modification in the human's outlook on what comprises a good life for their dog or their client's dog.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Ellen. Your microphone's fading out there. It must be, I think it's your reception.
Got it?
Yeah, okay.
Cheers.
Thank you. So just a brief example of what Helen had said there, just to summarize that for a human example. We've got, I use this for my clients a lot. We've got Freddy Krueger and George Clooney or whoever that you like, okay? Freddy Krueger is there. He is more important than George Clooney. All right, because Freddy Krueger is going to kill you. George Clooney's just charming and funny. That's a matter of opinion. I think he is, okay? But you get the point. So Freddy Krueger's now away. We can now concentrate on George Clooney. Freddy Krueger appears. George Clooney's not even on our radar anymore. Okay, now we get George Clooney. We won't want to be Clooneyed for forever, will we? You will get, if you get to know that, you just go, he's just a person, the same as everybody else, and you now know him. So that motivation for you to spend time with him is less than it was before when he was just famous man George Clooney. And that's happening with your dogs all the time as well. So your dog might be desperate to go and see other dogs, but when they've had their fill, if you like, of playing with the other dog, they now go, yeah, that's fine, thanks very much, can we go and do something else? Knowing we want to leave the party, I've just had a big dinner, I'm not interested in food and I feel stuffed and it's as if I'm not going to be interested in food but for the rest of my life, the way I'm feeling just now, and on and on and on. If we exercise heavily, your motivation to do that exercise at the end of the class is considerably different than it is at the start of the class. And all of these things change. And with threat, the problem that we have, and this is what you, Loki, might be going through, Caroline, is that if threat's ever present, you just become completely numb to that threat. And you just go, this is my life now. And you're like, that, cool. Okay, right, this is my life. And it's not a good place to be. Okay, lots of you will have been in oppressive work environments like that, where you just have to go in and grind through the day and keep your head down so that you're getting the least amount of hard time off that horrible boss. Okay, Bambi, I think you had your hand up. You need to unmute yourself, pal. Hang on. Let's see if I can help you out. Right. Try unmuting yourself. There we go.
Okay, I can certainly relate to not being able to take a dog to all the places you want to take them, and live in the city in Queens, so we're not right in Manhattan, but
Yeah.
They're the part of the city that I live in. It's pretty residential, so I can quietly walk through the neighborhood, and he's pretty good. But as it's summer and it's getting hotter and just a lot of construction around, we have obstacles to get through,
Yeah.
to get from our apartment to the quieter sidewalks. And sometimes he reverts back to the old behaviors of
Yeah,
barking
of
and eating him.
Because he's stressed, eh? We all
Oh, it's very stressful. It's stressful for me.
Yeah.
We want to cross the street and there's all kinds of machines and people
Yeah.
with vests and bus stops buses coming and going. And I have to be very alert for him but be calm at the same time and get him. Sometimes I look at which is the least noisy direction to go.
Yeah.
I may choose to go left instead of right because the stuff is behind me. But I have to go back to my basics and calm him again and give him opportunities to sniff and get himself right. And then we're fine. We can go on our way. But I have to remember that the environment does change. My elevator was broken for 3 days in the heat, and he had to go downstairs and upstairs. And, he's an old dog, and it changed his mood. So,
of course. And what you're also doing, and this is why, Jess, I'll come to your comment in a second. I think somebody else has asked one as well. Catherine. Okay, so I see your comments going up. Our affect is hugely important. All right, it's a relationship that you've got with your dog. So we can look at it clinically through a behavioural model, but we've also got a human experience of being on a planet which our dogs have shared with us for several thousand years. Okay, probably 10. I mean, the estimates are 10,000 years is not unreasonable for us to be having been living with domestic dogs. There's some evidence that it might even be longer than that. So we've evolved as two species together with that. So we can communicate well on a human level, which is done with realizing how you're breathing, having kindness in your expression and all the rest of it. Okay. And when you're going through, what's your wee fella's name, Bambi? Benji, right? So when you're moving through the environment, it's with anything that you're working through with an individual that you have a connection with, is to recognize this is hard, pal, and we're going to try and get through this together. But you're not saying you are saying in some way, I can't mitigate all of this all the time, but I'm going to stand right next to you while we're doing it, and I'll support you through it. And sometimes you just need to be sometimes all of us just need somebody in their life to turn around and go, that's really shit. That's a terrible time you're going through. And that's all you need, just that recognition of, this is difficult, isn't it? So that was lovely. Thanks for that. Your accent's awesome as well. All right.
Okay.
It's really cool. I love it. See the city accents in New York. I've always loved them. I had an uncle from the Bronx, and I could have listened to him all day. His accent's really, really cool. And you're losing a lot of them as well, because the young people don't talk like you anymore so much.
I know. But I do talk to a lot of the neighbors, and I do think the accents are changing, though, because everybody has exposure to all kinds of accents.
I know.
But I lived in the South for 10 years, and it slips in there every now and then, and I get laughed at water, Okay. But no, I appreciate it, and I think that you're absolutely right. When we got out and my dog was barking like crazy at everything, I just stood still. Shortened my leash and looked at him and breathed, and he was fine. And then we went on our way. So everything I've learned from you has made my life with Benji livable.
Thanks for saying.
So
cool.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Right, we've got another couple of questions. So 2 seconds. Catherine, you'd gone first. What did you say? So your question, Catherine, started to include other reinforcements other than food reinforcers from a lab. He absolutely loves his chuck it soccer ball, but I'm not sure how to incorporate it because when I pull it out, it becomes hyper focused on a soccer ball and we begin to get overexcited and try to grab the ball from my hand. Consequently, I keep going back to high value food reinforcers as my only option. Any suggestions on how to incorporate toys? Okay, so there's a really, that's actually, that's a whole lesson in itself, but I'm going to briefly touch on it, Catherine. You look at, I remember when I was learning this stuff, Susan Friedman talked about it and she said this, people talk about this thing of the value, it's too high a reinforcer, okay? Or it's too exciting, it's too motivating. Now, what has happened there is the behavior that's attached to that reinforcer are excited behaviors, okay? And if we look at it like that, the dog's motivation for that toy is so high that they can't think of doing anything else. All right. So the way that we would start to work on that, and we'll probably, I think the reinforcement lessons on the community and the stillness ones will probably help as well. So Sonny is, because he needs out, right? He's sitting here just now, right? Just by and he's been buzzing about because there's food here, which I'm using to keep him settled because he's not sleeping, right? Now, before, I don't know, can you hear him grumbling? No. All right, the microphone's pointing right, but he's occasionally grumbling next to me. When I first got him, if I brought out food, he would jump up and grab it out of my hand. He doesn't do that anymore, or he rarely does it, and the only time he'll do it is when he is tired, too hot, needs a drink, needs a rest, needs a break. So that's what when Bambi was saying earlier on about reverting back to those old behaviors, they happen when you're stressed, right? So what I would start with him is I would probably start with two balls, okay? You just give him one, and then you just throw the second one up and down and catch it. If he looks at you while the other ball's in his mouth or he's sitting with it, throw the other ball for him. He can only control one of them at a time, okay? And whichever one he hasn't got is the one that you pick back up. Now, at first, what you might do is you'll grab that one, then grab that one, then grab that one, then grab that one. And you just gently move until you can pick that ball back up, okay? You might pick the second ball up and kick the first ball again, and that will just give you a little bit of space from him, okay? And then when he comes back down towards you, see if we can repeat that. Now, when you're getting that pause, as soon as I always think that pause is like getting your foot in the door. We're just putting our foot in the door. Now I say, can I get more of a pause there? We can get a pause and we can take a breath. Lovely. Pause, take a breath. Can you, going back to the cues versus command, sit if I ask you gently once? Okay. And all that will start telling you that the dog's starting to become into his thinking brain, and then we can start building it from there. So you're starting to reinforce the calmer behaviors with access to the ball. Okay. The problem that we've got, and this is why, if you look at the reinforcement lessons on the program in the community, it's if I want stillness from my dog, I will not play tug with him because the reinforcer is not conducive to stillness. If I want still behaviors, I give still reinforcement. If I want fast behaviors, so a fast recall, stop and chase, recalling them from chasing a deer. Recalling them from chasing a deer, a food reinforcer to his mouth is not cutting it. Running in the opposite direction, bringing a tug out and having a massive game of tug or throwing the ball for him in the opposite direction might, because you're starting to match with what you want. High energy behavior that way. Let's do a high energy behavior this way. Okay. And then we start playing with that up and down, up and down. Okay. But that's a great lesson in and of itself, which we'll probably discuss at another time. Okay.
Okay. That was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look and find the online training there for the reinforcement so I can. Thank you.
Okay.
I think, John, it would be helpful just the work that I've done with Coda because Coda's behaviour probably is quite similar to many dogs where arousal prevents them being able to engage in lots and lots of activity and access lots and lots of reinforcers, because it gets in the way of being able to think. It's impossible to think. And as soon as we put them into circumstances where they're actually able to think, you can then start to introduce and drip feed in. And it's a bit, one step forward, two steps back, but you can get forward momentum in allowing that dog to start to, because what you're looking for, Catherine, is an emerging ability to regulate the self. So self-regulation, which is really about then how do we interfere with and influence the central nervous system to benefit the dog.
Your microphone's breaking up again, Ellen.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Can you hear? Can you hear?
It's all right. I'm just conscious of it because I want to get to Jess's comment before we finish up. Okay. So.
But I think some of the videos with Coda would probably help illustrate all of that as well, so we can utilise that. Thanks, Catherine.
Hey, thank you. I definitely will.
The other thing, just before I'll get to you, Jess, because I know you're asking a question. The other thing, Catherine, there, or with everybody, is arousals. Contingencies, okay, if then statements, or if then, or if when, okay, those two questions. If this happens, then that happens, or when this happens, then that happens. So when, then, or if then, okay. So those questions there, that's your contingencies. And arousal is this. Arousal's influenced by your contingencies. So if your dog is too over-aroused and becomes too over-aroused, we can change that. It's not a problem in the dog, it's a problem in our contingencies. It's the environment that we're working in, okay? It's just, so the dog I was assessing today, it's a bite case. And when I went into the kennel, he came out into his run and immediately started barking at me. And it was a big, as he was kind of moving back, so backwards and forwards. And all I did was I had a handful of hot dogs and I just threw them through the gate. They hit him in the face and he went, oh, what was that? And then started sniffing, and that completely changed everything. So his fear, in quotation marks, wasn't in him. It was in my approach there. And then I changed the approach because I put food down. Now, with some dogs it works and some dogs it doesn't. And he was fine after that. And I mean, like, it was a switch that went off. We're not always so lucky with other dogs, okay? But it's just to show that we have to change what we are doing, which is the whole thing from Caroline's question in the first place, okay? All right. Jess, before we finish up, on you go.
Oh, just very new here. This is my first community meeting I've been able to make to. So I just wanted to know, like, is it okay if we answer questions in the comments, or is that a you and Helen thing?
Right, no, I'll cover that when we've finished, because I'm going to finish up for the podcast and then I'll cover that. Okay, so
got it.
Okay, so thank you. All right, now I'll just read out those questions. Stay on. I'm going to finish the recording, so I'll finish the podcast recording part, and then we'll stay on and I'll just edit it out. So the questions that I've put in that group. So going back to the question that Caroline had asked, do we ever feel disconnected? As in not a whole lot of love, especially when training. Usually when I see a dog, usually when I train, I can fairly quickly see what a dog needs and how to meet those needs. And the dogs often look grateful, okay? So the questions that I asked was, which you can have a think about, you can answer them in the group and a whole bunch of other things, okay? So what I'd said there, what does disconnection look like, which we covered in the earlier part of the discussion. So describe behaviours. Those behaviours are verbs rather than adjectives. What does grateful look like? Okay, and I would dare say that that's a human term. All right, that's a human, yes, a human term. What are our reinforcers for those interactions, and might they be lacking? Okay, so we like to see our dogs orientating towards us with softness, with enthusiasm, and so on. And they might be lacking, which is why we now think that the dog isn't connected with us. If they're lacking, what do we do about it? I dare say we change our view of them. Okay, so we can reframe that to say, I don't need those reinforcers. Okay, and what are the dog's reinforcers and needs, and how can we meet them? Okay, so those are the questions that I had asked in response to that question. Okay, and you can just go into the group and have a look at them, and it will help. All right. So thanks for your discussion today, tonight, or this evening rather, and depending where you are in the world. Thanks to Caroline for giving us that question. It was a really nice question, because lots of us have got these things that were going on. Okay, so hang on a second, and we'll wrap up. So much love to you.
So thanks for listening this week, guys. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to. If you know anybody that might be interested in hearing the messages that we put out in our podcast, then please do share this with them. The other thing that I always like for people to sort of always like when people do this rather, is if you screenshot the episodes, stick it up in your Instagram stories, and then tag us on it. Okay, and then I'll share that story as well. So it's a way for you to give us some easy feedback with that. So that's always nice. And if you tag at Glasgow Dog Trainer, you'll be able to get us there. Much love to you. Catch you next time.